Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Wednesday, the Leading Change episode, this week with Milica Lubinic. Hey Milica, welcome back.
Hello, thank you for having me again.
Absolutely. We still have 2 more episodes to go after this one, so people stick around. There's a lot of lessons to come still. But today we dive into change, which is something we very often work with as Scrum Masters and Agile coaches. So we want to learn about one of those processes, Milica, and how you went about it. What were the steps that happened in that process? And as you go through the steps and tell us the story of that change, highlight for us the tools, the tips, the tricks, and the techniques you learned back then that you still apply today.
So in one of my previous companies, I think, so when they started transformation, it was long before I came there. And when I came, what I witnessed, and I think it's also a very common thing, is that things are moving very slowly. And I think one of the reasons that things are very often moving very slowly is because we are jumping into a bit more agile ways of working, but the ways that we're doing decision making is still not aligned with that. So for a lot of things, we're still in the consensus mode of making decisions. And that is taking a lot of time. And behind consensus kind of decision making is also our ability or inability to let go of certain things, to trust others to be able to do their job properly, right? So it's a kind of very complex topic. But sometimes changing the way that we're doing decision making is also helping let go of certain things, right? Sometimes it's kind of a building on that brain muscle from starting the tooling before diving deeper into the issue. So what I did then was kind of first reflected with the leadership team on how are we as a leadership team doing decision making. So what are the things that we are willing or not willing to let go of, and can we move to a consent-based decision-making? And just for the reference, the difference is that for consensus, we need everyone being on board 100%. And when we talk about consensus, we are focusing more on having that 60, 70% agreement, which means I'm not super happy with this decision. Maybe it could be better, but I'm not objecting it. So when you get into that kind of thinking, it's kind of starting with what is the best thing that we can figure out right now so that we can get started, and we'll align on the go. It's the most agile kind of way of doing decisions and kind of moving things forward, right? So, once we aligned in the leadership team that this is something that we want to try out, and once I went through the kind of teaching and mentoring process with them, we said, okay, let's create something that will work as a guide for everyone within the company to understand what is that exactly? How does, what is the difference? And how do you even make a conscious decision? Maybe for certain decisions, we have to have a consensus. And that's fine, right? It's too big. It's super important. I don't know. It's involving a lot of people. There is a lot of risk. I don't know. It could be that for some decisions, you need to have consensus. But how about we start or try out being, getting into the default with consent-based decision-making so that we can unravel and push things a bit faster. So I kind of created a bit of a guide so that people understand the difference and know how they can use it. And then I did a lot of workshops with teams, again, going through the process, going through different what-if scenarios with them. Because once you introduce consent-based decision-making, it's creating a lot of anxiety with people. That means, what if someone makes a decision that is bad? And then you have to go through all these conversations and ask, what is a bad decision? How will you know if it's a bad decision? And what are the means that you have as an individual to object it? So if you think it will create a risk, it will create a huge cost, it will do this and that, then it's something that we need to stop, right? But If not, if it's just about, oh, I might have a better idea, but I don't have it now and I'll work on it, yada, yada, then it's not an objection. It's an opinion, which is fair and you can share it, but it's not something that that is going to stop us from progressing. And then I did a lot of one-on-ones with people. I did a lot of team sessions. I did a lot of Q&As. But I think kind of the core for all these conversations was this kind of guide that I created. And it was more pretty much just understanding, how do you go with consent-based decision-making, how that can help you, what are the differences, and how you can put it in practice with big decisions, but also on a daily basis. And I think the learning, or the biggest thing that I noticed from the whole process is how much of what I would call legwork is needed. So how many of these one-on-ones and team sessions you have to have. So it's not, a straightforward thing. You often see this in organizations, like HR launches something and then they share it and they have one Zoom session and they think it's going to be implemented. And I think for me, it was more like, okay, this is just a thing that we will have in the background. But what we actually need to do is go through a lot of these scenarios, a lot of these one-on-ones, a lot of what I also did was offering to people, okay, if you want to create a proposal, how about I help you? You can pull me in. Let's do it together. Let me help you, kind of coach you through the process. So I think when trying to introduce a change, for at least from my perspective, as big as this one, it will take a lot of legwork. And I think that needs to be taken into account. I was expecting that, but it took a lot more than I initially.
It's funny you call it legwork, and I imagine that the metaphor is about going and talking, going and meeting, going and being present, right? Is that what you're referring to?
Exactly. So
I remember the work by Esko Kilpi, who's an organizational. He passed away some time ago, an organizational philosopher. So he talked a lot about how organizations develop, grow, become better or not. And he had this metaphor that he used a lot, and he called it the ongoing co-creation. And he used this process of conversation as we could call it the mechanism, right, behind this ongoing co-creation. And when you talked about legwork, it immediately sparked in my mind this idea that what you were doing was keeping the conversation alive, right? Because you understood that the change would have to be implemented by others, and you were just the catalyst. And therefore, as a catalyst, you need to keep the reaction going, right? Like if we talk about chemical terms. And one very practical way to do that is to become part of the conversation and keep the conversation alive. Is that how you see it? Am I characterizing it well?
Absolutely, loved how you reflected on this one. Exactly. So what I'm trying to say is that for a lot of these things, you cannot just create a beautiful workshop and expect that things will change. You have to be present in the team meetings, in these one-on-ones, in the team sessions. You have to create a lot of different opportunities. I think also a variety of different places and times, like culture follows structure. You have to have different kinds of structure to help and keep the conversation going, so that it's a regular team meeting where you can just jump in and they're talking about certain things and you just quickly can ask what kind of decision making would make sense for you right now, and then it's a sparkle and it keeps happening on the go with different conversations. As I said, it doesn't have to be, I have this idea and then I want to push it through. It's more about changing the way that we're thinking about decision making on a daily basis, and for that it's absolutely necessary to just be present and do a lot of this legwork.
Yeah, I like how you call it the legwork, because it really requires us to go and meet people. Very often in the Kanban community, we talk about meet the people where they are, right? Like don't push stuff onto them, meet them where they are. And I think that's a very graphical way to describe it, right? These days, it's easy to do the legwork. We can just sit on a Zoom call. Although it is not as humane as being face-to-face, it still is one way to go and meet people where they are, and using those curiosity questions we talked about earlier in the week. I think there's a beautiful story of how something that I've been referring to before this, keeping the conversation alive, but I think the legwork metaphor works really well here. So thank you for sharing that, Milica.
Thank you.
Leading change is one of the core skills we must acquire, but it is only one of the steps towards our success as Scrum Masters. Tomorrow, on Success Thursday, we will talk about how to define success for the Scrum Master role. We'll cover tips on how to measure your way to that position, and most importantly, how to develop that focus on continuous improvement that is as important for Scrum Masters as it is for teams. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.